All right, welcome back to another episode of Lachlan Chases Greatness. Still working on a title. To be honest, I don't know if it even needs a title. I've just kind of think of them as like, Lachlan's musings or whatever. And I feel like that's actually a pretty apt description for today's. Because I was listening to a podcast and there was two interesting parts that I found on this. And then in classic fashion, my thoughts have not flowed very well in this at all. But what they were talking about is that the pain, the suffering, the things that you have gone through, not only were they important, they were required for you to get to this point. That people who do extraordinary things, who change the game, who reach massive levels of success, have a chip on their shoulder. They go through pain, they suffer through things, they have this part of them that often through trauma or things like this allows them to go to a different place, to dig in deeper, to do more work, to do more than the average person would do. And I spoke about this the other day, that like you need to step into that darkness so that you can do these things, so that you can push beyond that situation. And I do firmly believe that. Then on the flip side, I was watching a video, and this made perfect sense as well. They were talking about Alex Hormozi and how he channeled this pain and this suffering into this immense success. And he can't even talk about it without crying. And, there's a good possibility he's going to be the most successful entrepreneur of our time if he continues on this trajectory. But they were talking about, within the video, they spoke about it, and he was like, but once you reach success, you cannot then still live in the pain and the darkness, because otherwise you'll crash it back down again. I found this a fascinating one, because I think there is also some validity in that. In my life, I've reached, not world-changing, staggering success, but certainly within my own world, high levels of success. Like, I'd be the most successful person in my family or the most successful person I know. And that obviously means I need to level up and needed to change the game and all that kind of stuff. But I'd reach that point and I'd burn the business down. And then I'd build it back up, and even higher than the first time, I'd burn it back down. And I've done this 3 or 4 times. And it was an interesting one to reflect on. And I was like, was that because I was still channeling from pain, that need to prove something, to do that to do that for a dark reason, to prove to others that I could, to overcome this, whatever it is, to use that trauma, that pain deep inside? Or was it because that level of pain and trauma got me to that level? And then I needed something else. And it's not that we need to seek pain and trauma, but when we reach a certain level of comfort, it's very easy to put aside that darkness, to put aside that thing that allows us to go to that place, that to do the work that others will not do. Because when we reach a comfortable level, and I think that was part of it, and it was also within that own space, it was about who I was surrounding. As I said, I became the most successful person in my group. I was the most successful person in my family. Then what? Like, I'd proven myself. Obviously the answer is I need to change my circle. I need to elevate up and find new people so that I reach up to them, that I don't lower myself back down to those around me. But it is that fascinating one, that I do think there is this level of, you need a chip on your shoulder. You need something to prove. You need to be able to go out and channel that. And I think the chip can be, fabricated to a certain extent. Like, there's those stories of Michael Jordan, and he'd make up stories about slights and things to go out there and destroy people because he needed that burning fire. And I think within that, there is a bit of that once you reach a certain level, don't go back into the trauma. Be blissfully dissatisfied with where you are. Be super grateful and proud of that. but be dissatisfied because you know you can do more. So you need to elevate higher again. And I think that's part of it, that from that point, we then have to go in and find the next, I don't know, to use a common phrase and to re-change the meaning, that next trigger, that next thing that is going to allow us to push further than we currently are, to push to a higher level, to, as I said, go in and go beyond what most people would think is sane and rational. And even within that, like, I find more and more that as I authentically step into who I'm meant to be, the world and the universe, or whatever you want to call it, God, is aligning things and they just kind of flow into each other. And I'm like, oh, there's that thing. So within that, I went for my weighted walk. That's a standard thing. Zero choice mentality. It gets done every single day. And at the moment, it is raining every single day. It's raining, it's misty as hell, it's cold outside, and, haven't reached winter yet, but it's coming. Anyway, I misjudged how wet it was when I went out. And so by the time I came back in, I was drenched. Like, every step, my shoes are squelching, my jacket is heavy, it is soaked through with water, my pants are soaked through, all layers. I was wearing thermals at the time, they'd soaked through, everything had soaked through with water. And like, I normally, when I go for my walk, if things align, I do 2 hours of sessions, I have an hour and I go for my walk, and then I do another 2 hours of sessions. So I go in that time. So I'm coming back to clients and they're going, you're mad. Like, this is crazy. And one of them was like, you put us to shame with this. And it was that one of like, it was twofold. And I don't mean this as arrogance. It's just the truth of who my current clients are. Of course I do. Like, we're not even in the same category. And that's not disrespectful. They are doing, for where they are at, they are doing phenomenal things. Like, they have elevated their game to such a higher standard. But especially these clients, they're women in their 50s. Like, we're not playing the same game. You're playing backgammon and I'm playing in the UFC. Like, they couldn't be further from each other, kind of thing. And it was that just interesting one of like, but that's who's around me. And so I need to find other people like me to compare against, to compete against. Like, I don't have anyone in this circle at the moment to compete against with this kind of stuff. And so at the moment, the chip on my shoulder is that I let myself get back to that, a place that I could even be considered in that same league. That's enough of a chip. But at some point, that chip on my shoulder is going to fall off because, well, when I'm back to a level I find acceptable, then what? Now I need someone else to compete against. And even within that, like, they were mind boggled that I'd be out in the rain. And to be honest, it didn't even like phase me. I didn't even notice until like someone said something and they were like, I was like, oh, yeah, I suppose. And then like, the whole point is to be uncomfortable. And now I'm really irritated because I'm said like 15 times in a row. But the whole point was to be uncomfortable. But it's not uncomfortable anymore. That's just what I do. I go for a walk every day. At the moment, it's with a 20 kilo weight vest on. Soon, when that becomes to a point that I can feel that it's getting easy, it's going to be a 30 kilo weight vest. And then I don't know, but like, this is the point, that this task that was meant to be uncomfortable, to push me beyond my limit. Yes, it's also meant to deliver the cardiorespiratory response. It's meant to build conditioning. It's supposed to help me burn body fat. It's supposed to make me healthier. But on the mental toughness side, I was like, this one's lost its potency. This one's wearing off because, yeah, I wasn't troubled by it. It wasn't, mentally challenging to be like, oh, I've got to go out in the rain. Oh, no, it was just, well, it's 8:00. This is what I do. Like, this walk has to get done. So it either gets done now or 8:00 at night. So I'm going to go now. So there is this whole aspect of the balance of the darkness, the balance of finding something that drives you beyond. And I think there is that thing that I said, and more I'm falling in love with this concept that you need a purpose, you need a challenge, and you need a war. And they are separate. They're about the same thing, but they are separate ideologies. You need a purpose, which is a fulfilling, empowering, exciting point to do this kind of stuff. You know, it needs to be something that will bring you joy to share that with the world. And, for me, that's my family. And that encompasses so much. It includes my fitness, it includes my health, it includes my work, it includes what I do for, like, how I impact the world. It's how I show up as a man. It's how I'm mentally built. It's for my fortitude. It's how I lead. Like, that purpose covers so much and allows me to show up in all these different areas as the best person, because I want to be the best example ever for my kids and for my wife. The challenge, when we're talking on the physical capacity, I need something new. Like, as I said, that weighted walk is, that's why I got the 20 kilo weight vest, is now becoming, it's not a challenge. Like, the going every day, the weight is the challenge, but nothing else is challenging with that. That's why I shifted my workouts, because they are kicking my ass at the moment. But it needs to be something that I'm going, you need to be humbled by a little bit. And then there needs to be something slightly outside of your capacity and your reach. And you have to become a better man to be able to conquer that challenge. And then something to go to war with. Because you need something that, as I said, that chip, that competitive fire, that something to channel that testosterone and that anger that should be there as a man, as long as it's channeled into the right things. Like, I've had a couple of these conversations where people say those aren't positive things. It's labeled as toxic masculinity these days. It is not. It's an important factor of being a man. It's biologically ingrained in who we are. It just has to be utilized the right way. So the perfect example is going to war in the weight room, going to war with mediocrity, going to war with the demons in your head or the bitch voice in your head when you talk about powerless. Go to war with these things. Have a chip on your shoulder. They said you couldn't do this. Now fucking show them that you can. And that fire and that drive lights something in you that I find cannot be lit in other ways. That other things, if you don't have that, make you meek and pathetic and submissive and just coasting through life, waiting to die at the other end. A life with no purpose. You need that. This is why I go to war, because you said I couldn't. You're out there to prove something, even if it doesn't matter if those people ever know that you are proving them wrong. We need competition. We need fire. We need something to compete against. We need something, a chip on our shoulder to go into that dark place, to be able to push beyond what we thought was possible. These things are incredibly important. And I think we need to channel that. And as I said, channeling the trauma as things happen in your life. There will be more things that are bad, but I think you can deal with that trauma through this process. And I found it interesting watching the one about Hormozy, because I don't think he's fully channeled that. Despite having done these things, I don't think he's channeled that. And maybe his trauma was more intense. I don't know what it was, but he was like, I was in so much pain that this was how to do it. That was me. That was why basketball was my out. Because I hated my life. Like, I was the one who could never do it. I was fat, I was overweight, I was unathletic. I became suicidal because I hated my life so much. I was bullied, and look, it's that old saying, Joe Rogan said this, and I loved it. The worst thing to happen to you is the worst thing has ever happened to you. It doesn't matter how it compares to anyone else. It's still the worst thing that's ever happened to you. But I channeled that. Like, I hated my life, and fitness saved me. Literally, the story, and it's a story because I've told it so many times, but it goes, I was about 14 and I was bullied in school. I didn't feel like I had friends. I didn't feel like I had any support. And I would honestly come home every single day and I would think about how I was going to end my life because I couldn't see it getting better. I just couldn't. It's just the reality of it. And for my 15th birthday, for some, I don't, there are many things in my past that I don't know why they happened the way they did. I cannot remember the specifics of how they came about. I just know the flow on effect of that. But for some reason, my dad bought me a weight set. One of those benches with a screw-on bar and those tiny little plates from Rebel for a birthday/Christmas present. And that saved my life. I went in there and it became my oasis. It became my sanctuary. It protected me. And I went to war with my body. And I channeled all that hurt and all that pain and all that suffering into my muscles, into those workouts, into pushing beyond. And if I could hurt myself more in the gym, then nothing could hurt me on the outside. I did that, and within 6 months, I'd outgrown that, and then I had to get a gym membership. And this is literally, this one thing changed the whole trajectory of my life. This is where I am now. We are talking 15, 17 years later. This is what I'm still doing every single fucking day. This is what I've done for my career. This is how I provide for my family from this one moment, you know? And then there are other ones that flow on. I had depression and I channeled that into wanting to be the best basketball player ever. And I got the scholarship and I played in college and I played for my state. And, and then it was taken away from me. I got a staph infection from a spider bite. And because that wasn't related to basketball, that was classified as a non-sporting related injury. Therefore, my insurance wouldn't cover it. So we determined that it was cheaper for me to fly home, and that was going to end my college career, than it was to go to the hospital in America. So for 2 weeks, I lived on a mate's couch, essentially dying. Like, I wasn't getting anything. Eventually, we forged some papers, and I went to a free medical clinic under one of my mates' names. And they gave me some antibiotics and an injection into the point. And I still remember this day, the doc being like, "Oh, honestly, these things are nothing. Dime a dozen. We'll get you injected. We'll give you some antibiotics. We'll clear it up." And it was on the back of my hamstring. He flips me over, goes to look at it, squeezes it. It squirts into his mouth. He then throws up, comes back in all his PPE gear, and proceeds to tell me that it is the worst infection he's ever seen. He urges me to go to the hospital. I know I cannot do that. So he gives me an injection into the point. He gives me 3 separate antibiotics. And then I'm meant to fly home. So I am sick. Like, I am, got fevers. I'm in pain. I am not well. Somehow I get onto a plane and they confiscate my antibiotics at the first TSA point. Said for whatever reason I couldn't transport drugs. I'm like, the antibiotics, they've got my name on it. No, that wasn't flying. So they were taken on the first flight, when they first take off and they still got the seatbelt signs. My cyst on the back of my leg explodes and there is now blood and pus running down my leg. So I stand up to go to the bathroom and the flight attendant's like, "So you have to remain seated." And I'm like, so I just turn and show her as this blood and pus just gushes down my leg. And she's like, "Please go straight to the bathroom and please be careful while you're there as we take off." The flight path that I had to take home took me, I think it was nearly 78 hours or something. Because I went from Orlando to Dallas to LA to New York to New Zealand to Queensland to Sydney. And every single time we took off, my staph infection exploded. And it's like this giant cyst on the back of my leg like this. Every single time. Finally land. I'm exhausted. I am delirious. My mum gets me there and rushes me to a doctor. And to this, they told me, they're like, "We are not sure how you didn't die. You should have died." And they've just put it down to maybe the antibiotics my mate gave me. That was the only thing that saved my life. But that was the end of my basketball career. This thing I dreamt for my whole life. So obviously that sent me into a spiral and depression and all this kind of stuff. And then I got a shot at playing pro in Australia. And that's a different story. But for whatever reason, it didn't work out there. And that was just kind of the end. I was depressed. I spent my whole life working for this thing. Didn't think I was ever going to be, the number one prospect in the NBA or anything, but I thought I could go pro. And it just disappeared. So I channeled this pain into the next thing, and I opened my gym. And I took it from nothing and made a shit all money. My first year I made $14,000 my first year in business. My rent was $15,000. The only reason we survived was I'd met my wife by this point. We were 21 years old, and she paid for a lot of things, and then I had a second job, and we ground it out, and as I said, built it into a reasonably successful business, enough to provide for me and my family and to give us a quite good life. But I had to channel that pain from the original failure to do something. And, for a while that worked because I was young and successful. But as time went on and, you have kids and you have bigger responsibilities, it eats away at you when it's not actually something you're meant for. And so that brought the next chip on the shoulder, that I let myself go, and I had to build something out of it. And that was the first dawning of 126 to greatness, to build my greatness again, to carve that out, to carve that character of who I knew I could be. And then I let it all go again because I still had to put food on the table. I had to keep a roof over our head. I had to provide for this family, this incredible family that was my reason. And I let it all slip away. And I lost track of who I wanted to be, the man I knew I could be, the man I know I'm supposed to be. It all disappeared again because I was just trying to keep my head above water, keep that gentle comfortableness ticking along. So I sedated with food, with TV, with social media, with video games, with all of it, until I hated the man in the mirror again. And there it is again, that chip right on that shoulder. And so here I am with that chip on my shoulder that I cannot be that man. I have to be the man that my daughter, my son, and my wife can be proud of. And I can look them in the face and go, I did it. I did it the right way. That, and there's a reel going around, and it's like, why do we have all this wealth, Mummy? Because Daddy never gave up. And Daddy's not fucking giving up. Daddy's starting here and building this point, and then he's going to build a business that he can be proud of, that he can authentically step into. And I'm going to risk it all and close a business that makes good money to do something that makes me the man I know I should be. And I know that I won't let that fail because I will not let them down. But all of those things are little chips on my shoulder. I know there's doubt there. I know there is already. I know my wife doesn't believe that I can deliver the things that I promised. Because why should she? I've been promising her for 10 years that I would deliver this incredible life. I've done a reasonable job. She doesn't work. She'll never have to work again in a day in her life if she doesn't want to. I've delivered 2 beautiful kids, but it's not the true life that I promised. So why would she? She still loves me and supports me. Don't get that wrong. She's an incredible woman. But, the writing's on the wall. I've promised these things. I've been promising them from the get-go. And here we are 11 years later, and I make a reasonable living. And there's nothing wrong with that, except I know I'm meant for more. So there's another chip on the shoulder. I have these things, and I look at them, and I bring them up, and I look at them, and I own that. And I'm going forward, and I'm going into that dark place, and I'm going to destroy them. And I'm going to destroy the trauma that's attached to them, all that pain and suffering that's attached to them. Through the work I'm doing, I'm going to destroy them. And this is how I handle and deal with trauma. And I think this is the way for men to do it. That They talk about the difference between men and women is women need to talk through their emotions. They need to understand them all and get them out in the open. That men require action and purpose and drive. And this is it. This is how we deal with our trauma. We create action and purpose and provide for those we care about. And we use that trauma and that pain and that suffering to do that. And we push forward and we create something meaningful. And whatever that might be completely different for you as it is for me. But you need to do that. You need to find something to create through that pain and suffering. Channel that into the greatest thing that you can and make it into something amazing. Chase your greatness. It's what this whole thing's about. This is why I call it the Greatness Club. Because when you're chasing it and you just pursue it, once you've completed 126, you join the Greatness Club. And then you're chasing greatness. Whatever that greatness may be for you, it doesn't matter, but that's the purpose. And then you do that forever. You're forever chasing your greatness. You're never going to reach it because every time you do, it levels up and it pushes further and further out. It's the whole fucking point. But there's purpose and there's drive and there's fulfillment in chasing that and seeing how far you can take it and seeing what is on the next level. So, my question to you today is, are you channeling that pain, that suffering, that trauma? Have you placed those chips on your shoulder? Can you pull them out and go, fuck yeah, use that as a fire, burn through that trauma and use it to fuel you to the next level? Or have you just given up? Woe is me, victim mentality, and you're just coasting through life, accepting comfortableness or even maybe uncomfortableness, but not by choice, and just accepting where you end up in life. I know which path I want to take. I hope you'll join me on that. That's all I have for you today for Lachlan's Musings. And I'm glad I got that out. It helped solidify things for me, and I hope it did for you as well. And until tomorrow, we'll be back with more. Talk to you then.